What is up, everybody? On today's episode, me and the boy Simi are talking about a 28-year-old founder who's saving the traditional news industry by providing a way for you to get around paywalls and pay per article when reading journalism on the internet. Next up, we have two 28-year-olds who've built a platform valued at over $100 million for industrial design, and it's backed by investors like Index Ventures and Figma. So we have a good one today, and I want to remind you guys what you're listening to. This is Our Future Podcast. Simi and I sold our media company to Morning Brew in 2023, and now we're off the hook with this podcast covering the smartest, most intelligent, and most ambitious young people building companies that will change the world. So I'm excited to get into this one. We're kind of recording last minute, but I feel like inspiration always comes in, desperate times, times of pressure is where diamonds are made.
Dude, we're racing against the clock over here. That's why I'm almost bullish. This might be one of our best episodes yet. Diamonds. No,
I agree.
What's that saying around diamonds and pressure?
Pressure makes diamonds.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Come on now. Yeah, it's not hard. It's easy. We have plenty of startup idioms and phrases we're going to pull out in this one. But I'm going to just open up with the first story. So Yehong Zhu, and she's behind a company called Zett. So she's at Harvard. Her first business is in, like many young people in university, pairing high school students and their parents with, advisors who are at Harvard or students at Harvard who can advise them on the college admissions process. But her mom was a journalist, and she ends up getting an internship at Forbes. And she makes this, broad observation about the media industry. When you're trying to read online journalism, you're often hit with that all too familiar paywall. And she found that paywalls have a 0.5% conversion rate. Compare that with kind of any other internet wall or pop-up, and that number is far off the norm, right? Like, that is very odd, right? So it's clear people don't like to pay for information, and oftentimes they're going to an article from a publication and they just want to read that one article. It's a super interesting headline. It's like Business Insider is talking about how this guy eats one banana a day and runs like 5 companies. It's like, I want to read that, but I only want to read that one article. And that's, the thought process for a lot of consumers. So what she's built is Zett, which is a Chrome extension, which gives you, for $10 a month, access to 30 articles where you can bypass the paywall whenever it appears on over 100 premium publisher sites. So she's got Forbes on board, and she's got a bunch of other kind of like local newspapers on board as well. And it allows you to circumvent that nasty little paywall. So she's raised over $2 million. She originally raised $1.7 million, and then she just was about to close $1 million crowdfunding round. And apparently they have thousands of users. So it's definitely, I think, been slower to grow than she anticipated because the product's kind of had this beta tag on it for a while. I'm sure the hardest part has been signing up publishers to agree to partake in this program.
Yeah.
But it's an innovative idea, and she's gotten a ton of media coverage and attention for it. And I think people are kind of rooting for it. It's like, I'd love to use this product and, just be able to consume news on the internet as I please. What do you think about it?
This is one of those businesses where crowdfunding does make a lot of sense, because I think a lot of consumers have faced this problem, or at least have thought of this idea. I remember coming out with the same idea in like high school and not acting on it. And I would venture that like, it's probably one of those things where it's like, you think of this in college, maybe you're just out of school. But for some reason, getting publisher buy-in is probably super, super hard. Now, my hunch is one way she's probably gotten over that is maybe with the Stacked advisory board, or she has some connections to one or two big publishers who are willing to take a chance on her and this platform. I think one other thing that's interesting about this is that you're just paying a flat fee for the credits each month. And I think when I had thought of this idea, or maybe others have tried it in the past, I always thought that the way it would work was like a microtransactions, like you're almost paying a nickel or a dime every time you wanted to access or get through a paywall. And they probably didn't love that model so much. So it's like, what's a dime to a
what's
publisher?
A dime?
So, No, I think, she's definitely like pioneered ahead, and this is like a cool business for sure.
Yeah, I mean, crowdfunding can be a great model for consumer companies, right? Because it essentially just creates buy-in alongside capital, which I think is a win-win. You know, there's this actually kind of unrelated, but I don't know if you heard of this company. I think it might have been called Miso Robotics, but they create essentially machinery that goes, or robots that go inside restaurants and help prepare food. They did a crowdfunding campaign for their product, even though they could have raised from private capital. The reason they did it is because obviously this is disruptive, controversial technology that you're displacing workers. So giving the average man, the little guy, a stake in a company that could transform, you know, the way humans do labor is actually kind of a dub, because it's like, oh no, we got the people involved. Like they could have been a part of this. And I feel like that's just one tactic that companies can use to get like buy-in from consumers as well as investment.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably either going to be consumer tools or it is super deep tech, futuristic, cool things that people can get behind. Those are probably your two hottest categories in crowdfunding, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, Morning Brew does so many of those crowdfunding ads. You know, like today there was like a tire, it was like the you know, infatigable, infallible tire that goes on like trucks and machinery and stuff. And I was like, you know what? It's a pretty fucking good idea.
Yeah.
But dude, this whole idea of fractional usage, I think, is super exciting. I believe that, you know, we've just seen fragmentation across a ton of different industries that's really hurt the consumer's wallet. You know, streaming is a great example, right? Today there was an article, I think it was the Journal, or maybe it was Morning Brew, but it was like people are constantly canceling subscriptions for TV shows on certain streaming sites and then renewing them, or like just
a third of them will come back.
Yeah, it's called stream hopping. And people do this similarly in journalism, where they create free accounts. So like they'll get 5 free articles, they'll just put in a new email address, a new whatever, and they'll just, you know, do that. But it's obviously a time consuming process. And these newspapers need to understand that people are doing that. So they might as well work with Zet to like get at least some money for it, instead of just people signing up with 10 emails.
Yeah. You know, it makes me wonder though, because oftentimes, you know, you see two sides of this, which is either it is the kind of viral media company with clickbait journalism, if you want to call it that, which is hidden behind a paywall, right? So it's just like a list or like some, you know, tabloid-esque like feature or whatever that they're trying to bait you into just through curiosity. Yeah. Or you have like very specific, maybe niche publications that have a paywall element to it, right? And, you know, I think The Information is one of those where it's like a subscription model. And I do like it in those capacities, because I think it better aligns the incentives. Like in the case of The Information, if they're not an advertising driven business in media, which seems to be the norm, like you're no longer incentivized to do clickbait stuff, and you're no longer incentivized to kind of, you know, report on things that no one actually gives a shit about, but it just like, you know, baits you into clicking into them. And through that, I think it actually creates a much stickier following, because I know people who like live and die by the tech journalism that The Information reports, and they, you know, love every single article. And it's like, well, that's how they've hooked you, is like you know, the content is just really, really good, and you're willing to pay whatever their subscription fee is month per month. I think the challenge is like, you know, I think, you know, especially companies like Forbes, most of their content is like lists, right? It's just like, here's your, you know, 30 under 30, here's your 40 under 40 for billionaires. And it's like, you know, after someone reads that one time, they're never going to come into it again. So it's like they have to hide behind the paywall, or else they're not going to make money.
Yeah, I just think it's a lose-lose though. The consumer's not going to pay to get through the paywall 99.5% of the time. And the company put together a great list that's really valuable and well done, and no one's going to read it. So I think Zet is a good solution to mediate that process, right? It kind of reminds me of ClassPass. On ClassPass, you buy a set amount of monthly credits and then can go and take fitness classes at a large variety of gyms and studios. And I think that was a super disruptive business. I believe they sold for 500 mil. And I'm surprised more industries have not essentially done this fractional usage model. My friends are trying to build a product right now. It's also in the gym space. It's called More Gyms. And what they do is they're trying to build out the world's largest directory of all gyms across the world. So wherever you're traveling, wherever you are, you know where the good gyms are. And they're also trying to pioneer a daily pass model, wherein if you just want to work out at that gym once because you're in the city for a day, like you can go and lift there and you can pay like a kind of flat fee. The problem is getting sign on from these businesses. None of them want to do it. None of them want to participate in these one-off usage programs. And I understand why. They want to get that business for the need, right? For that, they want to get the month-long subscription. They want the 6-month package, right? That's how they all operate. Just like, why would we even open this up to fractional usage?
Do you know how much the publisher gets paid each time someone clicks into an article?
I don't know. So how does that $10 get distributed? I actually didn't figure
That's what
that
I'm
out.
really curious
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Well, the same thing goes with ClassPass. And the way I envision it is like you pay ClassPass this set fee, and then they have a profit share with the gym in which you selected the class with. So I would assume the same thing's happening with Zet. So you get 30 credits a month for $10. So it's what, 33 cents per article. So it goes to the publisher whenever you go to one of their articles.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, I agree with you. I think this fractional component is kind of finding its way in a bunch of different industries. I think software is also kind of heading in that way. It's like, why should we just have to pay, this the fat subscription price or whatever when we're only using, a certain amount of features and we're only using it for a certain amount of usage or, credits in this case, right? And so I think it just naturally makes sense. And I think you're seeing this in services too, right? It's like, instead of just paying a fat retainer, like pay off of what you're using. And I think, when spaces inherently get very, very competitive, we've talked about this before, the creativity then has to be around the business model. And I think if you can present it as a way of like, hey, that Forbes subscription is going to cost you $30, but you pay $10 to us, and not only can you access Forbes, but you can access 25 other publishers that are also charging $30 a piece. That is a very enticing offer, and I think that makes a lot of sense for folks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is that New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal are never going to use Zet, right? Those are the big three, right, that are always going to be able to have a strong, substantial subscription business. I think it's the publishers like Forbes and Insider and these local newspapers that are really in trouble with the future of journalism.
I'd push back. I think New York Times is also struggling. If you look at their numbers, a lot of their money is coming from gaming, like games like Wordle. Like it's not actually journalism that is pumping up their balance sheets and their P&Ls. It's actually like gaming. So I think a lot of media companies are struggling on the journalism front. And they're kind of backed in a corner because it's like, it's still, the old cats running these companies, and they're scared to try new things. I think, again, like New York Times, like going with Wordle is kind of an interesting bet, and it's working out for them. So they're kind of like, okay, this is working for us. But yeah, I mean, you just haven't seen too much creativity. And I think maybe this is the right time for a business like Zet to exist, because now, the writing's on the wall, and it's like, unless we change our ways, like we may not exist. We got to work with companies like this. They also see companies like OpenAI, right? Like, who will just like, report on their journalism and summarize these answers, right? Like there is a very real future where people aren't scrolling through the news and they're just like asking the questions, like fill me in on the top 10 bullet points, and you're getting them. And it's like, okay, cool. I know what I need to know. It's like either innovate or die. And I think that's probably what is really at play here.
Yeah, I think you make a fair point. I think that the big publishers have the most leverage, though. They're the fucking New York Times. You're going to read that shit. You got to pay for it. And most consumers are going to have a subscription to one of the big three for like their primary high quality news coverage. But maybe, yeah, you're right. There is a day when they do come into Zet's model. But right now she's going after the people who really goddamn need it, which are the smaller publishers, right? Sometimes I want to read an article about my local town and I get paywalled. It's like, no, like I would pay 33 cents for it with my card and I had it on file, but like, no, it just doesn't make sense. You mentioned OpenAI. This is like a corollary between media and AI. It's like, I guess with like AWS or cloud hosting is also a corollary in that you pay for credits. It's like usage based, like for credits. So like, maybe this model of like software development and AI, like that should be brought to more spaces, like in the
Yeah.
consumer products market. You know, I could see this working in streaming, right? Like how cool would it be to be able to
I was
pay,
thinking the
you
same
know,
thing.
$1 to stream a TV show each episode versus, you know, needing to buy the $10 subscription to Paramount Plus.
But you know that exists, right? Like you can go to YouTube already, you can go to Amazon Prime, and that is actually funny enough now, just bringing back the old renting model. Like you're
Right.
renting a movie or
I
a
think
show.
I think when there's when there's one player that innovates ahead of the rest, like you know, Netflix, and then everything becomes disrupted, everyone joins in, and then it just needs to revert back to the old model to make sense again, right, for the consumer.
We've said this before. What's old is new. What's new is old. It's like we just keep making circles around the same place.
Yeah, we're running in circles here, man. There's no innovation. It's lost. But dude, I think Zet, you know, is just like a big bet on like how for one, how many users can we attract in the interim before we get as many publishers as we need on board, and you know, how can we eventually convince the big players to come in, because people hate subscriptions and the American consumer's wallet's getting thrashed by them. They got way too many for content.
You know what's another place you could probably do this in, and it's a little bit easier? That said, like I guess the one caveat is like the pricing is already not that high to begin with. But I actually think you could probably replicate this model with newsletters. Like so many people have newsletters now, and I think a lot of them have struggled on the advertising side, and so now they're kind of like, let's just lean into communities, let's put a subscription behind this.
Subscription, yeah.
But if you think about it, there's probably still a few articles that are like big money makers for them in theory, right? Like that are almost their form of a lead magnet, right? Because the first thing you do when you subscribe to anybody's newsletter is they send you their best newsletter or their 5 best newsletters that they've ever written or were super popular for you to read through. And so my hunch is something like that would work as well in this case, where it's like you could probably go to, you know, several big creators, and then before you know it, there's probably some kind of opportunity here, or you can build it around a big ecosystem like you know, a Beehive or a Substack or something like that, unless, you know, they were also wanted to like incorporate this in. But you know, what I've noticed though is that like for companies like that, there's always some kind of risk, right? Like if they run the ecosystem, why could they not add this feature? And my hunch is like they're not in that game. Like they're not in the game of creating like fractional readership opportunities to the newsletters in their ecosystem. And so that's why I think like you could probably build a big business doing this if you wanted to replicate it somewhere else and maybe have less friction.
For a young person thinking about this concept, like I would look at any industry with a subscription and see if there's a way to innovate in bringing multiple players together to acknowledge the, you know, defunct nature of their subscription offering and show them that they can make more money. I think these bigger players, these bigger news companies just need to be convinced they can make a lot of money. And for that, Zet needs a ton of users. So again, this is a massive consumer play. She needs a ton of attention. She needs a ton of users. And she needs to make this mainstream. She needs everyone to have this Chrome extension, right? Because, you know, you can really negotiate with the big boys when you got a lot of users. So
yeah, totally.
It's hard. Businesses like these are hard because you need to come with a bunch of users, right? You need to come with a massive user base. That's the ultimate leverage, man. Like, it's also just such a chicken and the egg problem. It's like, I can't get the big publishers till I have millions of people, but I can't get millions of people till I have the big publishers. So, you know,
that's the challenge with any market.
It's the magic. It's the magic of an entrepreneur. It's the magic of an entrepreneur to navigate the interim there, and figure out how to create magic on either side. That's the hard part. I mean, that's just business 101.
Should we go ahead and segue into the next topic?
Yeah, tell us about the next story.
So for our next story today, we have these two entrepreneurs in their late 20s. Their names are Jordan Taylor and Kaylin Richards, and they've just raised $20 million at a $100 million valuation for their company, Vizcom. I actually think Jordan has a really cool backstory. You know, he grew up in Detroit, and he spent a lot of his time building car prototypes. And, you know, after he graduated from college, he became an industrial designer at NVIDIA. And I think that's kind of where he was first shown the problem that existed in this space, where he was using, you know, these hand rendered paper drawings and trying to use that to communicate with engineers, which was very technical and tedious. And so take that and put it in parallel with like these new generative AI tools like Midjourney that were coming out. And so, you know, he kind of put that it connected the dots there. And what he realized is that all these generative AI tools are really focused on consumers. But when you look at the industrial setting or the enterprise setting, you need to have much more detailed direction over the creative process. And that's where, collaboration and revisions are so crucial. And there weren't tools really focused on solving that problem. So he created, Viscom. And so through their platform, Viscom, it's essentially letting these industrial designers turn their ideas into realistic photo renderings. But it's really cool because it co-works with AI rather than trying to just outsource it completely, right? So a designer can essentially, use their pen and draw out something, and then you use AI to go fill in the gaps. And so I think that's really, really cool. They're also building out this new thing and this new integration with 3D printing. So a designer can upload a few lines into their software and get a 3D printed model. Now the company's worth over $100 million, and, they've got some cool investors. And I think, there's some cool things that they can do with this.
No, totally. I think what these guys understood super well is the need for synergies between the necessities of human labor and the additive qualities of AI. And that you need to be able to bridge the gap between kind of the basic blocks that a human needs to convey with the kind of creative abilities of AI. And that you can't just have AI do everything, and you can't just have humans do everything. But what this platform has nailed is that a nice combination of humans working in concert to save them time and increase the quality of their work. And I feel like it's an amazing example of how AI is going to impact more industries other than just design. But it's like, how can we create software that augments human work in the ways that we still do it, but also like saves time and makes the work higher quality, if you know what I'm saying. So like, how do we pair human ingenuity with AI ingenuity to create truly amazing products, designs, and work output?
Dude, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think, it's become no secret. A lot of these AI tools that, have come to market, they've overpromised and underdelivered. Like, a lot of these big companies are really upset. It's like, yeah, we know AI will eventually automate our workflows and it's going to be a real tool for us. But right now, the models just aren't that good. And I think that's what everybody is realizing. So what do you do in the meantime when AI can't replace everything you're doing? Why don't you use it as a tool, which is kind of what it was supposed to be in the first place, right? Co-working and leveraging it to enable you to do your work faster and better is probably the right way to look at it in its current form.
No, for sure. I mean, these guys nailed it in that, like, you do the drawings yourself. Like, that is because like creatives are like stuck in their own ways, right? Like literally telling a designer that you're going to have AI do all of their work for them is wild, right? Like, but also just like adopting the tech. Like, people draw, they're creative, they do things on their own, they translate sketches. Apparently what was happening is they would do sketches by hand and then try and translate it into Adobe or some of these other platforms, or Autodesk. And I just looked at it. Autodesk is a $50 billion company. They do design software for robotics and car design and like everything. They're like the ultimate kind of industrial design software. So it's a huge market. And yeah, I mean, these are like, you have to speak to these people, right? It's just like, they're used to doing something a certain way. Like, don't completely reinvent the wheel. Like, make it comfortable enough for us to continue our workflows as we know them. Like, changing somebody's workflow is like disastrous. Like, how are you going to get a piece of software adopted by doing that? Like, try and lean on what they already do and then just like kind of augment it. So I thought they were super smart in that respect. And then they also combine like, other elements of what was working in other design platforms, right? Like revision and collaboration, which are so key in these enterprise companies, because nothing gets done with just one dude. So
collaboration is huge at big companies when you're selling into enterprise. I think, obviously you want a good single player experience, but you have to nail multiplayer, right? And that is where revenue expansion is created with a lot of these software companies. It is this premise that, you can get in multiple seats and you can wrap in multiple functions to use the tool.
Yep.
And so,
dude, that's why I love the founder of Frame. Like, I honestly just like admire his business so much, and that he focused on one specific feature of creative collaboration, which was reviews on videos. And given there's a lot of people that need to contribute their 2 cents to things like that, he got a lot of seats on the software subscriptions. and he just nailed one part of the creative process and owned it. And I was like, damn, that was such a genius business that sold for $1 billion. Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard in the creative world to make everybody do something the same, right?
Yeah.
The very nature of being a creative, being a designer, being a content creator, being an artist is that everyone has their own methodology and their own strategies for producing their unique work product. So creating a piece of software in this space is very fucking hard. Like, we shouldn't make it sound like it's easy, but if you can crack it and you can become ubiquitous, you've built a multi-billion-dollar company right there. If you've gotten
Well,
into
in some ways,
workflow.
like, it's probably made it easier to deliver a better quality rendering when it's all said and done, because, you know, what's happening right now is you have this text interface and you just type in what you're looking for, and it's like, please, Mr. AI, go do all the work for me. And now it's just left guessing. But I think if you can give it the blueprint, or at least, you know, set up the foundation, then it just becomes an inference tool. And I think that's also a big part of this, which is it is able to take in all your past renderings and take in all of the past versions of something and incorporate that into the new rendering. And so it's working on all the old information to better use inference tools to give you a much better quality, you know, final service or final offering at the end of the day.
This software is like so buttery, like just from the website and all the product demos and tutorials. Like, this is so well done. I mean, it's 20 million Series A, they better be. But
there's also one other
really
cool story.
Project.
Yeah. And I think there's also one other cool story worth mentioning here. So just another scrappy tactic that I loved from them, which was, you know, Jordan was essentially a small YouTuber, right? Like, the guy was a creative and naturally liked making videos and stuff. And so he had 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers, and he's showing this product demo on his YouTube. One of those people just so happened to be on the R&D team at Ford, saw Jordan's product demo, and then recommended that they should use it internally. And that was his first big enterprise customer. I was like, wow, like that's awesome. That's like spontaneity and hard work all coming together so you can put yourself in a place to get lucky. And I thought that was great.
I mean, we've always said that creating content like maximizes your surface area of luck. So maybe one day somebody
is, like, you don't even need hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. Like, 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers got him, you know, what is probably $1 million customer, right? Like, that's huge.
Such a good story. Maybe one day someone influential will be watching our future podcast, and you know, I don't think we even have more than 5,000 subscribers. So, you know, maybe we're right at that point where we'll get the Jordan Taylor effect. You know, Mark Cuban, if you're watching this, come on the show.
Yes, sir. Cool. Anything else you thought was cool about them?
Well, I want to go back to the point you made about over-promising. Like, essentially, like what we've talked about before on this podcast is AI is only as good as your query. It's only good as the questions you ask it. In the design capacity, it's only as good as the creative impetus, the inspiration that you give it on like what to create. And it's really hard with just text to be able to describe like a drawing you'd want to build. So I love that they've integrated like the hand-drawn human. The only thing, like, how long is it going to take for a robot to be able to like draw like lines? Like, that's like a mechanical function that only like our species can do. Like, that's humanoid as hell. So I again, I really like that. And I think you're right that these AI companies are over promising. Like, really, if I go and try and use Sweet Spot, that AI company for government contracting we talked about last time, and I have no idea what I'm looking for, what I'm equipped to do, like what deals I could possibly win, I'm not going to get any value out of the software. Nothing's going to do everything for you on its own. Like, there's no way. I mean, maybe down the line, but like as of right now, AI is just way too limited for non-specific instructions.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you know, creativity is arguably like one of the most important skills that makes us human, right? The ability to connect dots in like very particular ways based on our past experiences and past learnings. And that is really hard to automate. Like, so it's funny to me that like social media content creation is where all of the AI energy and automation is taking place. But yet at the same time, that is arguably the one thing that I think, you know, on the creative side is like super hard to automate. Like, I would have always thought that, and I think most people would agree, they would have came after like the tedious tasks that require like no brain work. And it's like mind-numbing work. But for some reason, they've tackled the creative problems first, which is just kind of interesting, I guess, how the pieces fell.
No, totally. I think they went about it the right way. And if we look at like you know, the acquisition of Figma that was attempted by Adobe and some of these other creative platforms like Canva, how large those are. I mean, they're excellent businesses. They're very hard software to build, but if you can pull them off, they're very hard to disrupt. And you know, this platform's just really embraced the AI side. So, you know, they've seen what the disruptive feature is and built their platform around it, as opposed to just tacking it on. Like most
One
of these
thing else
platforms
about the
would.
Figma thing. So what I've noticed is that any cool design company that I have seen, Dylan Field is an investor, and he's the
Mm,
CEO of Figma and the guy that started it. And I was
yeah.
like, you know what, like how goated is it? Like the guy who killed it in design literally probably gets the top deal flow possible, anything design related. And it's
Yeah.
like, not only is it a great signal to have him like as an advisor, as an investor, but he's also probably going to make a shit ton of money, like off of
Yeah.
all of these companies.
Like he
Um,
already hasn't made a shit ton. I mean, dude,
yeah.
honestly, it's often the guys who build a successful business in an industry, they often end up doing it like 2 or 3 times over again, right? We've all heard these stories on the Our Future main channel of these guys like doing it again. Like the minute they're done with that old company, they just create a slightly better company in the same space. So
Well,
I don't
look,
know.
I
It's a
also
circle
have
of
like a
life.
piece of advice here that I think is relevant, which is, you know, maybe you're wanting to start a design company, or someone listening to this is, and they may be thinking, man, I'd love to get Dylan Field as an investor now. Like, that's a great point you guys are making. Like, that would be awesome if I could get them. And like, I think time and time again, it's one of those things where like, I think this is where trying to just network is like, you know, like it's a little overrated. Like it's better to just work on really cool stuff, and then you'd be surprised at how easy it is to get in front of really important people if they think what you're working on is super cool. And
I
I've seen
think
this time and
I
time
I
again.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people network aimlessly, and
Yes.
I believe many times young entrepreneurs are bringing a knife to a gunfight when it comes to networking, and that they don't have a product that's worthy of a mentor or an investor's time. They have an idea, and that's just not attractive or appealing. But if you show someone that you've either brought on another investor or know somebody else that they know, or that you've built like a really good piece of software, and you have just like nobody ever is going to get Dylan Field investing in their company based off a cold email based on an idea. Like you need to have like a working platform or like just some heft. You know what I mean?
Dude, and
Like
there's a good chance, like, look, you know, when you're the whale in an industry, the reason why these people are whales is because they know exactly what is taking place in their ecosystem. They are aware of all the cool design companies, all the cool design startups coming up. And there's probably a good shot where like Dylan was kind of doing like his own independent research or whatever. Viscom came up on his radar, and he probably could have even reached out and said, like, I think what you're doing is super cool. I want to be involved. And I've heard that happen with a lot of other big name investors, which is like they were just doing research, kind of organically came across a software company and then wanted to participate.
yeah,
So I think,
totally.
you know, like it goes back to like, how do you put yourself in a position to get lucky? And it is like truly just working on dope things,
Yeah,
and like putting yourself like in cool positions like this.
100%. I think that's a really poignant way to end the show.
Perfect. Well, on that note, guys, appreciate you all tuning in to another episode of Our Future Podcast. As always, we love doing this. Please give us some feedback and subscribe or like wherever you listen to the show. And we will catch you again next week with another episode of Our Future Podcast. Stay frosty.
Get paid.